Happy New Year? Question mark.
Happy New Year? Question mark. Are you Chinese or not? Question mark.
Happy New Year. Happy Chinese New Year.
Gung hei fa choi. Is that right? I can't say it.
Yeah, that's right. As far as I'm concerned.
Okay, good. Happy New Year, the dog. Happy New Year, the doggo. Happy New Year to good boys everywhere. Woof.
So I brought with me today some, I don't know how to say it in English.
Turnip cake, I think.
Turnip cake.
How do you say it in Chinese?
萝卜糕.
Is this the same as the turnip cake you get with dim sum? Or is it different somehow?
If there is a difference, it's subtly different because I don't know.
Is it the same name?
Yes.
Okay, then I think it's the same.
You should try some and then tell us.
Okay, I quite like the turnip cake you get with dim sum. One sec. Let's try it.
Can you describe it?
Not really. It's this weird kind of stodgy cake made of turnip. It's made of turnip, like English turnip. It's made of like daikon radish, is it?
Yeah. And it's not spongy in the cake sense.
Oh, it's got the sausage in it too.
I've been warned it's quite peppery.
It's just a sound of chewing now. Is this like an ASMR vid or is it just offensive? I can't tell. Well, I quite like turnip cake.
Well, now you have plenty.
I do. You've given me like a huge Tupperware container of it. So thanks, April. Thanks, April's mum. I think it's quite nice fried. It makes the outside a bit crispy. Yeah, it's not spongy. It's kind of like pure stodge.
It's like a jelly.
Yeah, it's kind of more like a jelly.
With just far too much gelatin.
Well, anyway, I quite like it.
Not sure there was much point to that. It's just us eating, really. I wasn't even talking about eating. We were just eating.
We were just eating some traditional Chinese New Year food. You should have said you gave me a red packet because you're married and you have to now. I thought that was amusing.
Well.
And I had to be like, oh, thank you, Ting Gogo, or whatever the appropriate honorific is.
Hurry up and get married so you can give bread packets to my daughter.
Yeah, then it'll be like detente. Yeah, that's true. Well, it's fine. You've got other people to give bread packets to your daughter.
True. April's just taking her out for lunch unnecessarily just to...
Oh, look, my daughter's here.
Yeah, don't forget about my daughter.
If you're not familiar with Chinese traditions, that probably made no sense to you. It's traditional for married people to give unmarried people red packets at Chinese New Year. Red packets of money.
And if you're married with children, the children are the source of income.
The source of income. Okay, if you want to put it like that. Yes.
More importantly, you've come back from skiing.
Yeah, I've come back from like another double holiday.
6 days of skiing as well.
Yes, 6 days of skiing.
No sores, no aches, no pains.
No, I'm fine. Well, I was away for 2.5 weeks and the first week was skiing. So actually I had a week to recover from skiing. Though no, I was not particularly sore anyway. My skiing is quite energy efficient. So
lazy man skiing.
Well, I think most of the exhaustion from skiing comes from like fighting the mountain, like trying to fight against gravity. So if you just like ski really fast, then it uses up hardly any energy. So I just ski really fast, just shoot downhill. And yeah, as long as you've got good balance, it's fine. You don't have to use very much energy.
No funny stories.
No funny stories really.
Fine. Anything funny from Iceland?
Fun fact. The Northern Lights in real life are really anticlimactic. We were really excited to go and see the Northern Lights. Like we were really like pumped to see the Northern Lights. And then, you know, the weather was good. The aurora we were told was strong because it was like 4 out of 8 in terms of like solar wind strength or something. So we were told there was a good chance of seeing it. And we got driven to this desolate, snow-covered, rocky field in the middle of nowhere. And then suddenly we hear this cry, the Northern Lights are over there. And we look over there and there's just like this kind of vague glow in the sky. But it's not, in all the photos, it looks really impressive. It's like this epic green, like floating curtain of like lights. And in real life, you kind of just see this pale greyish, slightly lighter patch of the sky moving about, but it's not bright enough for you to perceive any colour. So in real life, it's kind of just this vague, floaty, slightly brighter patch of sky. But when you point your camera at it and do like a 30-second exposure, then it looks epic. So I've got amazing pictures of the Northern Lights, and everyone on Facebook is going, "Oh, this is amazing. Wow, it must have been incredible." I'm like, yeah, it looks better in the photos than real life. So there you go. Fun fact. The Northern Lights in real life, much less impressive than photos.
The Icelandic tourism board will be on you. Have you ever watched a film in concert or with a orchestra?
A film with a live orchestra?
Yeah, so in Hong Kong, they're showing Star Wars A New Hope with an orchestra.
No, I have not done this.
Would you? Opinion, please.
Is it really going to add much?
Live music.
Well, I'd be curious of trying it, but I can't say it'd be like, oh, I can see that's going to be amazing. I'm like, I don't know.
It's because you've just seen the Northern Lights.
I've just seen the Northern Lights. It's because I've just seen this like vague glow in the sky. Yeah, it sounds like the sort of thing that's more impressive when you tell people you did it than the reality of doing it.
Like our podcast.
Well done.
Sorry. On that note, welcome to Lost Levels Club.
Welcome to Lost Levels Club.
I have with me today Sir Michael.
Hello.
And myself.
Ting. Tingogo. Doje. Something. Lycee. Something. Cantonese.
You could just say Gong Fa Chai again.
Gong Fa Chai.
Today, we're a book club for games.
Hooray!
And we have spoilers for
Torment, Tides of Numenera. Correct pronunciation this time.
Doesn't sound as good though.
I thought... I can't believe that I got the name wrong. Because we were talking about how we couldn't pronounce any of the names. Is it Sagus Cliffs? Is it Sagus Cliffs? Is it, we were saying all this stuff, Stitches. So we were saying that we couldn't pronounce any of the names, or we weren't sure how they're pronounced. And then it turns out we're pronouncing the actual name of the game wrong. Because I thought it was Numenera. And I couldn't understand why Google kept trying to correct me until I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's Numenera. It's got an E, not an A. Whoops.
So we're British.
Yeah, it's the British pronunciation. It's fine.
So, we need to recap.
Well, okay, first off, what are we actually talking about in this episode? Because I said last time, finish the game. But I mostly said that because it wasn't clear to me how we should break it up. And now we have both finished the game, but this last section is actually really long, it turns out. So the first bit, I think we did about 15 hours? And this last section is about 20-ish hours. Slightly more than 20 hours, I think. So we are going to break it up after all. So if you haven't finished playing the game, that's fine. We will go up until you meet with the Memovira. Or is it Memovira? I'm going to say Memovira. So we're going to talk about the game from the Valley of Dead Heroes until the meeting with the Memovira. And we will do a separate episode from meeting with the Memovira up until the end of the game. So that's the new plan. Although we actually have both finished the game.
Yes.
And recap then? Story so far?
You should recap.
Well, we're the last cast off. We met a bunch of people in the Sagus Cliffs. We're trying to repair the resonance chamber, and we need to find a cast off called Mazov to do so. To track down Mazov, we're trying to get to Meal Avest, the entrance to which is in the Valley of Dead Heroes. And so this section starts off with us being in the Valley of Dead Heroes. And then do you want a summary of the story up until the end of this section of the game we're playing?
Yes.
So, we get to the Valley of Dead Heroes, we talk to a bunch of people and do a bunch of quests, and find the tomb that contains the entrance to Memovira. We get a mirror caster that contains a memory of Mazov, and thus are able to learn more about the resonance chamber. But the sorrow attacks Memovira, and we have to escape. And we take a portal from Memovira that leads us to the Bloom, which is some weird interdimensional living city underneath the Sagus Cliffs. And then we learn that the first cast-off is alive. Whoa! And to find the first cast-off, we need the help of the Memovira, who is the ruler of the Bloom. And to do that, we need someone important to arrange an audience for us. And the most important person who will help us is this guy called Dracogen. And in order for him to help us, we have to do a favour for him. And he wants us to retrieve an artifact called the Magmatic Amulet. Or alternatively, the Navigational Cortex, it turns out, is an option. So bring one of those two items to him, and he will then give us an audience with the Memovira. And that's the end of the section. In super high summary form.
Sounds simple.
But it was long.
It's no.
Actually, that's not fair. I thought it was actually really good. My opinion of this game has changed. I actually really like the Bloom.
We started before then.
Sorry, you just, my face, my expression changed. I was like, oh.
So we can start. Valley of Dead Heroes. Your airship takes you there. The moment you land, you're faced with an encounter, and you're asked to do someone a favour, as always. And I really thought I couldn't get out of this request to take out someone. How did you do it?
I sided with the memorialists. So there's two sets of people who are about to have a fight. There's two memorialists. Actually, the memorialists hiding. I think you can't even see the memorialists at this point. And then there's some of the children of the Endless Gate who are hunting the memorialists. And I had solved the murder in Sagus Cliffs in the underbelly. And the murderer was a member of the Endless Gate cult. So I was like, oh, I'm trying to find this murderer anyway, who's with the Endless Gate. So I'm going to fight Endless Gate because I know I'm going to have to hunt her down anyway. So I sided with the memorialists straight off and just fought the Endless Gate.
Oh, you fought them?
Yeah.
I thought you weren't trying to fight things.
I just did what I felt like. Sorry.
So I thought there had to be a fight, but I talked my way out of it. Which surprised me. I think I still hadn't come to terms with the fact I can talk my way out of everything.
Even if you fight them, it turns out you can still side with the Endless Gate. Because when I actually went into the tombs, again, there's two sets of people. There's the memorialists and the Endless Gate. And the Endless Gate cultists are holding the memorialists hostage to try and find the code for this whisper lock. And you actually can still side with the Endless Gate there if you want. Because I already knew the code because I talked to the memorialists outside the tomb. Because I'd sided with them. But if I wanted to, I could then just betray the memorialists and go with the Endless Gate at that point. But I didn't.
How did you get rid of the Endless Gate?
I just decided to fight them. I just had a fight. I was just like, no, I'm siding with these guys. Punch. Puncho!
I totally thought this wouldn't be the approach you'd take.
Yeah. I was like, I'm on the clock here. Let's have a fight. GTFO. Yeah, I actually resolved the Endless Gate quest really quickly, and I'm usually very methodical and try and do all the subquests in an area, but I actually just immediately went and just dealt with the Endless Gate, and went into the gate, and then closed the gate. And I didn't realise that the Severed Child quest is actually related to the Endless Gate quest, so I actually just closed off this huge storyline about the Severed Child, which I think you did.
I did. So what does that mean you missed, though?
Well, I started the Severed Child quest because I found some gigantic prism thingy that had, I don't know, it gave me the start of the Severed Child quest, but the quest itself, it would just move to the completed quest section without resolution.
It does that? I thought it would just disappear.
Well, it disappeared from my active quest. It just moved to completed quests, but it just stopped halfway because it turns out for the severed child, I would have had to go back and talk to some of the memorialists and talk to, was it Ronos or Ronon?
Yep.
I discover it was his daughter and do all this back and forth and something with Inifir. I don't know. None of that happened because I had already just gone into the gate and then had to confront Inifir and then was very confused because I actually did get some conversation item to talk to him about this child. And I was like, what? Like, why is this related? So even though I didn't actually know the connection, it was just one of the options. So I picked that option about what his dreams meant. But then I just obviously picked some other incorrect options because I didn't really know anything about what was going on. And I failed to convince him to close the gate of his own volition. And I was also in really dire straits because I actually hadn't rested before going into the gate. You know, I just immediately had a fight with a whole bunch of these Endless Gate cultists outside the gate, opened the Whisper Lock, went into the Endless Gate straight away, and then found I couldn't leave the gate. And also I couldn't die because if you die in the gate, it's game over. And when you were in the gate, there's these weird flapping skin creatures. It's just like
mattresses.
Yeah, mattresses. It's freaky. So it's like the flayed skin of people, but they're still alive, and they're asking you to kill them, and it will open a shortcut into the gate. But it also mentions that if you do that, it will make the gate itself stronger.
Yes, but...
So I was like, oh, it's probably better not to kill these people. So I didn't kill them, and then just took a long and winding route through the gate, but as a result, I had to fight loads of Endless Gate cultists.
You make the gate stronger, but what does that mean? Because I got the impression I'm going to talk my way out of this one anyway.
Well, when you actually have to do the fight, the actual Endless Gate itself gets a turn, and it's like this gigantic mouth that tries to like suck you into it and then bite you. And if you haven't killed any of these mattress things, then I think the mouth is really weak, like it's got really low chance to hit. So even though in all the fights this mouth thing appeared, it didn't really cause me any problems.
Yes, the mouth did cause me problems.
Yeah, so I think that's a trade-off. You can either kill these weird skin flappy things and go straight to Inifir, but then in the fight with Inifir, the mouth will appear and be quite strong. Or you can not kill them, but you have to take this long winding route and fight loads of cultists. But anyway, as a result, I had like no stat pools left. Like all my characters had like 0 stats. And as a result, I also failed to persuade Inifir because I didn't have enough effort to, you know, have a high chance to persuade.
But you also had the child Rin with you at this moment.
Yes, I had Rin with me. Which actually made it even harder because Rin's completely worthless. Like the first turn of every fight, someone would just take out Rin. They just like teleport over to her and like punch her in the face and she'd be down. And I'd be like, great. So I'm having to do this fight with 3 characters who have no stats. Yeah, I found it tough. So did you actually talk your way out of the issue with Inifir?
Yes.
Oh, so you convinced him to close the gate and that was it?
No, I still had to have a fight though.
Okay. But you were in a better condition and actually managed to fight him normally.
But so did you though.
Well, this was the only time I used ciphers. I literally just like unloaded all of my ciphers on him at this point. Like all of my combat ciphers. Because I just didn't have any other way of fighting him. Because I had like low chance to hit because I'd used up all my effort pools already. So yeah, I just blasted him with a load of ciphers.
I just fought him normally.
Okay. I mean, I think this was the only fight in the game I actually found difficult. I actually thought I might lose. Anyway, and that's it. The gate's closed. Resolution of this quest. And then Inifir appears as a reflection in the labyrinth because he's also a cast-off. Although actually it's not just cast-offs that appear in the labyrinth. But anyway, he appears in the labyrinth and you get, was it Inifir's madness? Some, you know, additional power from it. So anyway, there you go. That was the Endless Gate. How about the other tombs?
I want to talk about the other tombs and how you navigate the tombs. Because it was interesting. And at this stage of the game, we're in desperate need of things that are interesting.
What? Do tell.
Because at the end of the last episode, we were commenting that the ideas are all good and they sound good on paper, but the reality is it's all a bit meh. But I found navigating the tombs quite interesting.
I also genuinely thought the tombs were quite clever.
So how do they work? So there's a terminal and it's a 4-digit code and that will teleport you.
Yeah, the tombs are kind of arranged in a honeycomb formation. So they're all kind of hexagons, and then you can teleport directly to a tomb if you know its numerical combination. And you can also teleport to any adjacent tomb using this control console in every single tomb. Some of the tombs are story related, so some codes lead to a specific tomb. For example, the Endless Gate or Mila Vest, they both have particular fixed codes, and that code will always take you to that tomb. The other tombs are kind of procedurally generated and contain the names of Kickstarter backers. So if you pledged over $140 to the Kickstarter, then you got a grave in one of these tombs with your name on it. And as part of your backer reward, you can actually go and look up where your tomb is and then have a look at your name. And I at first thought maybe every backer was in the tomb somewhere, but I think it is only the $140 plus ones. Because I was thinking, if I look long enough, will I find my name? But no, I don't think so. I think it's literally only the $140 plus backers.
So talking to people, uncovering the codes to the tombs. So rather than have a space where you explore physically, there was back and forth having conversations with NPCs. For once in the game, there was a reason to talk to people, and not just because I wanted 2 or 3 XP points.
Yeah, actually, it gives you such a pathetic amount of XP. A lot of these conversations is like 2 XP, 3 XP, 4 XP, but it all adds up. But yeah, I thought it was quite an elegant solution because they obviously wanted to give some kind of backer reward. And I saw a comment on the Pillars of Eternity kind of forums saying that it's really immersion breaking because they had to sprinkle all these backer names throughout the game. And some of them are just really inappropriate, like for the fantasy setting. So at least in this game, all the random backer names are just confined to this one area of the game. So the really most immersion breaking names, at least, you know, they're not in your face. And it was quite an elegant solution. It's quite clever. I mean, I just like procedural generation in general. So I thought this was quite a clever way of cramming it all in with, you know, limited art assets. It also feels like there's more depth than there really is, I guess, because, you know, you keep thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to discover some random tomb that's got some amazing item in it. I'm not sure that actually really exists, but like there's the feeling that perhaps it exists, and that itself is, you know, fun.
That's all I had to say.
Other stuff in the Valley of Dead Heroes that I think you didn't do. There are 2 critical companion quests that you have to get here, and if you don't, that's it for their quest lines. Or certainly for Eretis anyway. So there is a monument of like dancing coloured lights, and it turns out it was actually built by Alagern. So if he is in your party, he will comment on it, and it gives you some insight into his backstory. And similarly for Eretis, as soon as you arrive in the Valley of Dead Heroes, you hear... Well, actually, maybe this is only because I've got the mind reading perk as well, but Eretis will mention something to you, and you can read his thoughts and be like, oh, let's not go and visit any strange alcoves. And he's like, why did he talk about the alcove? Don't mention the alcove. Why? He just said about the alcove, you idiot. So his internal thoughts are conflicted, and he's talking about this alcove like, haha, let's not go and look at any alcoves. And his internal thoughts about, don't talk about the alcove. You can find this alcove, and inside it is a box and a shepherd's crook. And when you touch the shepherd's crook, crazy stuff happens, and a reflection appears in the labyrinth of Eretis. And if you die, you can then go and talk to this reflection. And it's actually the real Eretis. So it explains why Eretis is this crazy hero with mad thoughts and a golden glow. Basically, Eretis, the real Eretis, is actually a sheep herder, or he's a yol herder, and I assume yol are like sheep. So one of his animals wandered into the Valley of Dead Heroes one day, and he went down to retrieve it, and he found this alcove with this box, and when he opened the box, this golden glow came out and absorbed into his body, and he just became the hero Eretis. Like, he had to become heroic because of these things just kept shouting in his mind to do heroic things, and he had no choice but to obey them. But the real Eretis is actually a Yol herder and wants nothing more than to live a quiet life herding animals and be left alone, but he's forced to become this hero against his will. So the reflection in the labyrinth is the real Eretis, and he tells you that he wants to just be freed from these demons.
And do you?
Well, we shall see. Yeah, it gets resolved later on. So both Allergan and Eretis questlines have further steps in the Bloom, and then Eretis in particular has a final step at the very end of the game.
So you're right about Eretis all along?
Yeah, there was something weird about him. It was pretty obvious there was something weird about him.
But you knew what his inner dialogue was.
Well, no. His inner dialogue is not really in conflict with his external dialogue. His external dialogue is like really weird and naive heroic talk. And his internal dialogue is just someone shouting at him to do more heroic stuff. So you can tell, there's definitely something weird about him. Because no one's really like that. So, Mila Vest, you get to it from one of the tombs. Makina knows the combination that leads to this tomb. Presumably, if you didn't have Makina in your party and you didn't have the Bronze Sphere, you'd find it out from either the Memorialists or the Endless Gate cult. One of them would also know this combination. So, whichever way you find it out, you go there, open the portal, and you're in Mila Vest, the Sanctuary of the Cast-Offs. You like this area?
Not necessarily the area. What happens in the area, yes.
I guess I was kind of expecting more from it in a way, but it's just one map. It's just one map with a bunch of cast-offs on, some of which are named and some of which are just called cast-off and really not interesting at all. I mean, some critical gameplay things you can do here. You can talk to someone who can upgrade your equipment. So she can upgrade the armor for all of your companions.
Did you?
Yeah, I did for all of them. Because I just had loads of money. Because I've been doing all the side quests.
I didn't.
Too bad for you.
I shouldn't be so tight-fisted. It just makes my life more difficult.
And then, storyline-wise, you can talk to a bunch of characters who are either on the side of the first cast-off or the Changing God. Some stuff about the Endless Battle. You also meet the first Dendra O'Hare, like the founder of the Dendra O'Hare, which is quite interesting. And then the most important person you have to talk to is Adiris, another name I can't pronounce, who is in charge of the sanctuary. So she kind of enforces the peace. So whether you're on the Changing God side or the first cast-off side, there's no fighting in Mila Vest. And she's de facto the leader here. So she has a mere caster of a cast-off that met Mazov, and you are looking for Mazov. So by using this mere caster, you will be able to talk to Mazov and learn something about the Resonance Chamber. But before she'll allow you to use this mere caster, you have to prove to her that you don't have ill intent. Because even if it wasn't obvious to you, or indeed me, your cast-off ability is that you can change the past by going into mere casters. So when you go into a mere caster and essentially control that cast-off, you are actually changing the past, which is crazy and doesn't really make sense, but it's a game, so you can do that. And she knows this and won't let you use this mere caster until you've proven that you're, not going to abuse it. And she gives you the quest to go and talk to a bunch of people in the sanctuary and diffuse some conflicts, or at least resolve some conflicts one way or another.
Which you do.
Yeah, okay. So you've got nothing particular to say about any of those?
No. Let's save it for the good stuff.
Okay. And then, once you convince her, she gives you this mere caster, which is of a cast-off called Zerian. And you have to complete some quest to retrieve an artifact and bring it back to some people, some other cast-offs. The Chimera, and in particular, you have a chance to talk to Mazov. You can ask Mazov about the resonance chamber and say, oh, it's broken, how do I fix it? And he'll be like, oh, it's easy, blah, blah, blah. Wait a minute, why do you want to talk about the resonance chamber? And you'll be like, the changing god asked me to. Or you can be like, oh, I'm not really Zerian, I'm another cast-off going back in time, woo! Whichever one you pick, he tells you that the resonance chamber will actually kill all of you. So it's going to absorb you all back into the changing god. And it will erase all the cast-offs, basically. So it's a bad idea to use the resonance chamber. Uh-oh. But it also tells you that the first cast-off is still alive. So everyone thinks the first cast-off is dead, killed in the endless battle, but actually the first cast-off is still alive, and she's somewhere in the bloom. And she also has a plan for the resonance chamber that, well, is different to the changing gods. It won't kill all of you, she thinks. So you now need to find the first cast-off. That's your new main objective. And the other interesting thing that happens is, once you exit the Merecaster, you wake up in the labyrinth. And the Spectre is there. And the Spectre turns out to actually be the changing god. So the changing god basically tells you, I'm going to need this body back. Sorry. Since I was happy to let you just run with it for a while, but now the first is alive, so I need to go and deal with her, and I'm going to need this body back to do it. Thanks. And you have to resist him, because if you don't, then it's game over, obviously, because it's no longer your body. So it turns out the Spectre, in your mind, is the changing god. Which is quite interesting, because it kind of means that when you tell people you're the changing god, it's kind of true, because you're not exactly a cast-off. It's not like the changing god left your body for another body and you're a cast-off. The changing god, his mind was kind of just suppressed in your body still, and he hasn't actually taken a new body.
Did you ever go around stating that you were the changing god?
No.
Same.
But maybe I should have done.
Same.
Actually, another funny thing that happens here, before the Merecaster bit, actually, Rin says she wants to talk to you. Oh, maybe this didn't happen for you, but this is when it happened for me. And Rin is asking you about the tides, and you have a conversation option to say, oh, my body is made of the tides. But I didn't actually know that at the time I talked to Rin, because you find this out when you talk to Melmoth, like the first Dendro, her, and he tells you, oh, well, us cast-offs, our bodies are actually made from the tides. And that's why we have this tidal affinity and tidal surge and all these tidal powers, because our bodies are made from the tides. And so Rin is telling you not to abuse the tides, or saying, you shouldn't mess with the tides. It seems evil. And you're telling her, well, actually, my body is made of the tides, so they're not inherently evil. But I weirdly could pick that option even though I didn't know it at the time. But I guess this is just minor bugs and scripting errors. I mean, I suppose it is a long game. They're allowed that. But anyway, that's a key insight, that your body is made from the tides. I just remembered that now, sorry. Anyway, you deal with the changing god, you have to hold him off. I think you can either... It's not exactly a crisis, it's not actually a fight with him, but you have to conversationally defeat him by... Oh, in my case, I pointed out lots of things he'd done wrong, like the weird thing with the probability engine and the ghost woman, or his inability to solve this riddle of the Singing Thorns book, which I actually had solved. Stuff like that. I don't know how you dealt with him. Was it similar?
Yes.
And then, after that, you leave the labyrinth, and Mila Vest is under attack by the Sorrow.
Do we want to talk about this in detail now?
Or do you want to leave it to the end to talk about all the cool crises?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So...
The Sorrow arrives, there's a crisis.
And which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yes.
And then you end up in the bloom. This is turning out to be really long. Turns out there was so much to talk about. The bloom. I actually really like the bloom. I like the bloom much more than I expected.
Straight off, from the very first moment?
No. At first I was like, oh, geez, this game. But actually, the Bloom was much more interesting a setting. It felt like there were so many more possibilities in the Bloom. It was a much more interesting space than the Sagus Cliffs. So it's another kind of city area of the game. There's lots of people you can talk to, and it just feels like there's lots of possibilities with these moors that open to other times and places. You meet lots of interesting characters who have various different side effects from that, and then the Bloom itself is obviously a living creature and is like whispering into people's heads and like weird consequences of that too.
It turns out the Bloom chose its leader.
Yeah, there's this thing, like this cycle going on of someone arising who has affinity with the Bloom, and they're known as the Memovira, or the Memovira.
You've got to commit. Can't do this.
I've been flip-flopping this whole podcast, and the Bloom is really just fattening up the Memovira. So, although it looks like this person has affinity with the Bloom and controls the Bloom, they don't really control the Bloom. The Bloom is actually just giving them interesting memories of like power and being a predator. And then at some point, the Bloom will just cast them off. Well, cast them off? Is this another parallel? I don't know. The Bloom will just kind of cut ties with them and then eat them and absorb their memories and experiences. And a new Memovira, just use the alternate pronunciation. A new Memovira will then arise and take their place. So, if you have Matkina in your party, you actually learn that Matkina was an agent of the previous Memovira, and he was betrayed by this woman, who is the new Memovira. But that's why Matkina had to flee the Bloom. And also, the Sorrow and the Bloom don't get on. So, normally, the Sorrow will not enter the Bloom. So, if you're a cast-off, on the one hand, it's not a bad place to hide because you're kind of safe from the Sorrow. But on the other hand, the Bloom itself is pretty much as dangerous as the Sorrow. So, swings and roundabouts. And there's tons of stuff in the Bloom. There's like loads of weird, interesting side quests. I mean, you know, there's so many things here. There's so many things here, and they're not in any particular order. I don't know how you want to do this. I mean, we mentioned before, as soon as you arrive in the Bloom, you talk to Dracogen, and he tells you, if you want to talk to the Memovira, you need to do a favour for me, and I want this thing called the Magmatic Amulet. So, go to the Ascension through this trade post, and get it for me. And then you very quickly discover that the trade post that contains the moor that leads to the Ascension, which is this weird crystal world, has been eaten by the Bloom. So you need to find another way to get to the trade post, which itself is a quest to open another moor. And there's a whole bunch of moors it could be. So you don't know which one is the one that leads to the trade post. And so you have to open, well, you don't have to open more moors. You might hit upon it the first time, but it's quite interesting to open the other moors anyway because they lead to interesting places. There's also resolution for Allergan's quest, the next step of Eretez's quest. You can resolve Rin's storyline because she's trying to go home, and you can actually open a portal home for her. You actually find out how she got to the Sagus Cliffs and can send her home. I mean, there's loads of stuff. Where do you want to go?
We should talk about highlights because it's a lot of side quests that run in parallel with the main quest.
Okay, so let's take turns. You first.
Or should it by area? Was there any sequence to the areas?
I suppose you arrive in the Memovira's courtyard, then there's vast interior, and then from there it connects to the old slave block, which is this mergent area, the Churgeon Swamp or something, which is where the healers are, and also this broken company of mercenaries, and then the Temple of Great Chiller, and finally, Small Niliesh, which is where the mutants are.
So let's start with the Memovira's courtyard. I don't have anything interesting to say there, though. Okay, maybe the only thing is Coty or Cotty?
Let's call him Coty. I call him Coty. Yeah, there's a slave. There's a pit of slaves, and backstory, lore-wise, if you commit a capital offence in the Sagus Cliffs, you can, instead of being executed, you are sent to this slave pen, And then you can be purchased as a slave, and people will feed the slaves to one of the Moors, because usually the Moors are interested in consuming predators, in inverted commas. So murderers usually are what the Moors will want to eat, and thus makes sense. But you can also elect to be made a slave rather than serving a prison sentence. And so this Coty guy is actually just a petty thief, but he chose to be made a slave. And it's actually really because he feels guilt for the death of his sister, because he feels like he caused her death. So he feels like he's a murderer, but even though he didn't actually commit murder officially, because his sister couldn't swim and she drowned because of like a prank he tried to play on her. So he feels guilt for that. And you can buy him as a slave and then do what you want with him, like feed him to a Moor, for example, or sell him to Decanted, which is this weird robot that wants to put its head on another body. Well, there's a whole like city of these people actually. So, you know, it's looking for 3 attractive bodies that you can sell to it, and Coty is one of them, for example. Or various other nicer things you can do to him, like you can set him free and find him a job.
Which is what I did.
Who'd you get him a job with?
The Memovira.
Oh, really?
Memovira.
So you got him a job as a guardsman?
Yes.
Cool. I got him a job with Sunderman and Sunderman, the leather workers.
What's the benefit of that?
He gives you a belt that he made. What does making him a guardsman get you?
He helps you later on when the sorrow attacks.
Oh, okay. Cool. I mean, Sunderman and Sunderman are themselves quite interesting.
Yes, I wrote that down as well.
I mean, it doesn't mention it now, since I brought them up.
So when you first encounter them, it appears like they're father and son, who bicker far too much for a father and son.
But it turns out they're actually the same person, but in a time loop. So, at some point, Sunderman the younger will fall through a portal and get sent to the past, and then thus have to work his way back to the Bloom in the present, at which point he'll meet his younger self and become Sunderman the elder, and they both run this leatherworking stand together.
What's interesting is that the elder's perspective on the world is so different to that of the younger, but the younger stubbornly refuses to take any advice that the elder has to pass on. It's quite interesting, I thought. The writing, we're fools really. We won't even trust ourselves.
Yeah, I have often thought what would happen if I was able to be sent back in time and talk to my younger self. I mean, what advice would you give your younger self? Or is it all too personal?
I don't think I'm wise enough to give advice yet. I still can't see how it's all going to play out.
Really? I think it's pretty obvious what I tell myself.
What would you tell yourself?
Buy Bitcoin. Buy all the Bitcoin you can.
No doubt your younger self would call you a fool.
Not when I tell them how much it's worth. Jeez. Buy all the Bitcoin you can and then retire.
I wonder if the world is in such a state that the Bitcoin will fail.
Yeah.
Just because
the act of me buying Bitcoin causes Bitcoin to fail. I'd be like, buy Apple stock, then buy Apple stock in 2000, then sell all the Apple stock in like 2010, and then buy Bitcoin with the proceeds, and then sell all your Bitcoin at the end of 2017, and then I don't know what to do after that, obviously. Buy a bunker and lots of tinned food. I'm not sure. Anyway.
What do you have?
The other interesting thing was Waits for Prey. I just thought it was cool. This is like deadly fighting robot, and it wants to fight worthy foes to try and make itself interesting to the Bloom, because it feels, is it guilt or regret? It remembers all of the battles it's fought and all the people it's killed, and it wants to forget and have a fresh start. And it thinks its best chance for this is to be eaten by the Bloom, because the Bloom will take something from you, and it wants the Bloom to take those memories. And if you have fought interesting things in the Bloom, it will fight you. If you just go straight up to it and say, I want to fight you, it'll be like, who are you? I'm not interested in fighting you. But you can fight it anyway. You can, it'll be like, I don't want to fight you. And you can be pretty much saying, well, actually, it wasn't a question. We're fighting, and you can attack it. And then it's actually quite strong. Like, I fought it when I first arrived at the Bloom just to try it out, and I lost. Probably because I had Rin with me, because Rin was still pathetic at that point in time. And it teleports you to this transdimensional arena, and it's quite badass. I think if I'd fought it at the end of my time in the Bloom, I would have beaten it easily. But it's no pushover at the start, at least, particularly if you have just Rin in your party who can't fight when you arrive in the Bloom. She's, not high level enough. So...
What happened?
Well, I just lost. But I think if you manage to kill it, you get the head of this construct. And later on, you can actually convince it to give you its head anyway, because later on there's a Maw that needs to eat a predator. And you can just say, hey, the Maw's willing to eat you, and it will just give you its head. It's one of the potential solutions. I mean, the other one is this Jar of Iron Wind, which is this crazy thing. Well, we'll probably mention that later anyway.
So, did you get the scalpel?
Yes, the transdimensional scalpel.
Which is for me, it was a very key item. But you didn't use it at all.
Well, I used it as a weapon.
How can you use a scalpel as a weapon?
It's a pretty big scalpel. Have you seen it? Did you upgrade it?
No.
You can go back to Ioxu, I-O-X-U, sorry. I didn't know that. These names, who comes up with these names? Jeez. You can go back to the guy who initially made it, and he can upgrade it. And if you upgrade it, it's huge. I gave it to Makina to use as her main weapon, and it's just like strapped onto her belt, and it's like as long as her leg. It's like massive. So it's a pretty good weapon. It's basically a get out of jail free card for the Bloom. Like, anytime you have to go through this whole complicated quest line to open a Maw, you're like, oh, this Maw wants cherry ice cream. Where are you going to find some ice cream in the Bloom? Instead of going through this ridiculous quest line to open the Maw, you can be just like, cut it open with a scalpel. And it's like, this Maw wants cut it open with a scalpel, but the Bloom wants cut it open with a scalpel. Shortcut to the end.
Well, that's what I did.
I mean, I never used it for that. Though I did think about it several times, but...
Your turn.
Oh. Then let's mention the Iron Wind.
Yes, please.
So when you get to the old slave block, which is full of Murdens, there is a blind woman there who for some reason the Murdens are totally cool with just hanging out with her, even though they usually hate humans. Maybe they can't tell she's a human because she's so messed up. And her disfigurement is the result of an encounter with this thing called the Iron Wind. I don't know whether these are all things that exist in Numenera, the actual general backstory game world in the Dungeons & Dragons sense, like the whole, lore of the bigger game world. But the Iron Wind is a cloud of nanobots that just rebuild things. They just take things apart and rebuild them. It's one of the few things that can permanently kill you as well, which I think was quite interesting. So she was horribly disfigured by it, and she has a jar of the Iron Wind. She's got a small portion of it in this jar, and she's like, I'll give you this jar if you can restore my sight.
But before that, on the very, when you first encounter her...
Yeah, Eritis is like, oh, this sounds like a dangerous thing. I want it. And then, I want to deal with it. I'm a hero. And if you don't tell him no, he just grabs it off her and opens it.
Yeah, I said, yeah, let's ask for her permission first. But that wasn't enough to stop him. And then we all died.
Yeah, he just opens the jar and it just kills all of you because it just disassembles you molecularly and then puts you back together in some crazy way, which is obviously not viable for survival.
Is that what happened to you?
Yes. So the first time I went there and I was like, I'm going to steal this jar off her. So I just nicked the jar off her. And then she was just like, lol, joke, I'm opening the jar then. And then you die horribly. And then the next time I went there and I was like, no, Eritis, let's ask her first. And then he just opened the jar instead. I was like, how many times am I going to die to this thing? And the third time, obviously, I knew what to say. I knew not to try and steal it off her, and also to tell Eritis, no, no. But I did restore her sight, and then she gave it to me willingly anyway. So that was interesting. And the Iron Wind is another predator that can be used to fulfill this more later on. The Churgeon Slump.
There's a few characters here, but the main one here is Taglio.
Let's call him, is it Artaglio? Artalio? I don't know. Let's call him Artaglio.
And you need him to open up the maw. And there's quite a few conversation checks.
There are multiple ways to persuade him to open. So the maw in the Churgeon Slump wants specifically this guy. And he's the leader of a company of mercenaries that are camped out in the swamp. And there are multiple ways to convince him to feed himself to the maw. So number one, you can just win a conversation, persuasion check with him. Number two, you can win a drinking contest with him. Number three, you can retrieve the banner of his company, at which point he says he'll do you a favour. And if you retrieve it, you can just say, my favour is I want you to feed yourself to the maw, and he'll do it. Number four, I think it's possible to feed him an essence of bravery that you buy from one of the other Churgeons, and then he'll feel brave and just do it. Or I think the fifth option, you can take some of his hair and distill an essence of him and then feed that to someone else and get them to feed themselves to the maw.
How many of those were you aware of at the time of opening the maw?
I was not aware that you could feed him an essence of bravery, but I was aware of the other four options. Oh, and of course you can use the scalpel just to open the maw.
Only knew of three. I was only aware of those three, and I think I failed to execute on three, so I used a scalpel.
You could have got his company banner back, surely.
Didn't know that.
Oh, okay, you didn't know that. So you failed the persuasion check, you failed the drinking contest.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember in the last episode I was saying 80% everything. That was a mistake.
Because 80% still means you'll fail 1 in 5 times.
So, well played the mechanics of Torment.
you were defeated.
After saying there's nothing to it and it's 80% everything, I was wrong. And I'm actually happy to be wrong.
Me, on the other hand, I solved all of them. I won the drinking contest and I had the company banner back, and I didn't try and persuade him, but I would easily have passed that conversation check as well. My character was basically spec'd entirely into persuasion and blah, blah, blah. So I would have easily passed that check if I wanted to. So I actually had multiple options available. I used one of my favours from him to get an item, which was this amazing shield. And then the other one was, feed yourself to the maw. So that's how I did it. And if he feeds himself to the maw, you can also absorb him as a reflection in the labyrinth later on. And it's actually quite a good reflection. It's like Artaglio's cunning, and it gives plus 20% damage to people around you.
There's a less important character you come across in this area, and it's Boras. Boras, let's go with that. And he asks for 200 shins, and I'm so naive. I really thought I could get something out of him later on.
He's just a drug addict. He's standing outside of this clinic that sells experiences, essences of so-and-so, an experience. And he's just I need more, man. I need more. Can you spare me some shins? I just need to buy another one. He's squandered all his family money and he's asking for more money from you. And you were just oh yeah, have some money. If he'd been oh, I just need some more crack. Can I have 200 shins for some more crack?
But this is a game, right? I'll get something in the long term.
But you don't.
Maybe I'll get some gold tied.
Wait. Do you get gold tied for helping a drug addict feed their addiction?
I don't know.
I'm not sure about that. Yeah. You can sell him to the Decanted. He is a beautiful person that the Decanted is interested in buying. So I think that is his main use. But I didn't do that. I told the Decanted to GTFO, so then little Niliesh.
Did you find anything interesting here?
There's quite a few things here.
Do you want to start? It's your turn.
Is it my turn? Okay.
Yeah.
The first thing is you can send Rin home. So there's a mutant here who actually has a maw on their body. It's kind of weird. And it turns out that Rin actually ended up in the Sagus Cliffs area because of this maw. She came out of this guy's maw in his body, and then she ran away. And he actually will say, it's like, oh, if you'd stuck around, I'd have sent you home. So he knows how to open the maw that goes back to her homeworld or homeland. I don't know where she's from, wherever. And you can open the maw, basically, and send it back. And for that, you need, again, either the scalpel or to find someone with a sufficiently good relationship with you. Basically, there's a weird guy who's like super enamored with you. And he's like, oh, you helped me when you were the Changing God. He thinks you're still the Changing God. He thinks you're Adan, which is itself a funny Easter egg from Planescape Torment. You can feed this guy's good thoughts towards you to the maw, and that will open it and send Rin home. Did you do this?
I did send her home. How did you open the maw?
Well, I fed this guy's, the Wander, the happy guy.
I then just cut the guy.
You just go, I'm just going to cut you. I'm going to cut you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and I was a bit dubious. I was like, should I cut you? Can't be asked, I'll cut you.
How does the guy react to you just cutting him? Is he okay with it?
Yeah, I think so. I was unsure that maybe there could be negative consequences as a result, but
what I didn't realise is that if Rin leaves your party, you can't get her back. So what I mean is, if you dismiss Rin from your party to bring someone else in, Rin actually is like not happy about leaving your party. And you can't get her back. I actually only found this out afterwards by like reading a guide. But when you try and call Rin back with the bronze sphere, she uses Aal, like her god of hiding, to hide herself from the bronze sphere, and then her symbol just disappears from the sphere. So when she leaves now by sending her through the maw, you can't call her back. But even if you dismiss her from your party, she won't come back, which I thought was quite interesting. So once Rin is in your party, she's there for good. So you just have to deal with this like useless 10-year-old.
Could you have called her had she not come into your party in the first place?
No. So Rin is, once you get her, you're stuck with her. And she is completely worthless until, I think once she gets to tier 3, she actually probably becomes quite useful because she gets an ability that lets her use a cipher multiple times.
Did you get her up to tier 3?
No, basically. No. There is an eventual payoff though, because if you send Rin home, then, as we'll cover at the very end, you meet her again as an adult. And then she's a monster. But we'll talk about that later.
I think at this stage of the game, I was realising I had enough edge for unlimited retries.
So this is your 80% for things that are retryable. So I guess sometimes 80% is a good option.
Yes.
Yeah, just keep retrying it to the level where you have edge. Yeah, mechanically it does feel a bit wonky at times with things like this. You think it should make you, regardless of your level of edge, cost you 1 point. But it just costs 1 extra point. But if you still have even more edge than that, then it doesn't cost you anything.
I had a couple of pieces of dialogue from the little Nialesh. When you first enter that area, there's a dispute between two parties.
Yeah, so this is the quest from Bruska to find the 2 patrols of the Memovira who have gone missing. So one of them is in the old slave block with the Murdens, and you can free them, which I didn't mention at the time, but blah, blah, blah. And one of the ones from that party, in fact, is the father of the kids that you meet earlier on in Sagus Cliffs. So there's some payoff to that. But anyway, this set in the mutant area.
I don't know the encounter, the dialogue wasn't that interesting. Well, I just had one line from it that I found quite amusing because I'm a child. You're leaving a trail of fear, Pierce. I don't know. I found this terminology quite hilarious, quite funny.
You are a child, Ting. What? Honestly, Ting. I just skipped over this unremarkable. I was like, yeah, blah, 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 intimidating.
You're leaving a trail of fear, Pierce. Who paid for your protection? Yeah.
This encounter, actually, it turns out, is quite important. So again, like something we'll talk about at the very end, but this is one of the critical encounters in the game. Depending on how you resolve this encounter, actually, it will change the ending of the game, it turns out. So at the very end of the game, when it's giving you info about all the things that happened, like after the end, if you resolve this encounter to diffuse the situation where you don't side with either party, so you don't side with the mutants and you don't side with the Memovira's mercenaries, which is what I did, at the end of the game, there's a big war between the mutants and the normals, and because there's no firm winner in terms of balance of power, there's a big conflict to see who's going to be, in control of the bloom, the mutants, or, because the Memovira is weak or gone or whatever, depending on how things played out. So, yeah. I mean, did you side one or the other, or did you diffuse it?
I diffused it.
Yeah. So we presumably both got the same ending.
And there's Crimper, the guy by the trash. And he's quite self-aware. He's nattering along. He asks you, are you a listener?
He's like, yeah, I'm a listener. Are you saying to you, I exhaust all the conversation options. I want to hear everything. And I ask all the questions too.
This made me take a step back and I thought, should I not be listening to everything just because that's how I should be playing the game?
It's true. I mean, I don't role play these games that much, at least not on my first playthrough. My first playthrough, I usually trust, if I play the game multiple times, I'll be more role play the second time maybe, but usually I play these games just once and I try and see everything in my one playthrough. So I listen to everything, I exhaust every conversation option, I try and do every possible path. So yeah, I will be nattered too, because it's like, maybe there's going to be something good at the end of it. And there was.
There's always 3 XP.
There's always 3 XP. There's also, this is the guy who teaches you to search in trash piles, right? And you find the Lascar helmet as a result. And then if you put on this like helmet filled with crap and like decaying humanoid, blah, disgusting, you can actually learn something very interesting, because the Lascars are a people who are on this space station trying to find their way home. They're waiting for a ship to come and bring them home. And so this helmet belonged to one of their people who they think has been lost. And obviously they are lost. They died. And this person discovered something and they need to cross-check the information they discovered with their like main computer of the space station, which is called the Cortex. And so if you find this helmet and examine it in detail, you get a quest to go and cross-reference the information on the helmet with the Cortex.
So I didn't examine the helmet.
Right.
So what do we have to wrap up the side quests?
Well, the last thing I have is really about the Cortex, but we can cover that in a bit.
Okay.
So, I mean, basically there is a moor in Little Niliesh that leads to this place called the Lost Anchorage, which is the space station with all of the Lascars on. And when you talk to them, there's like the captain in the airlock and you can talk to her and she basically says, oh yeah, you're free to wander around. We're trying to find our way home, blah, blah, blah. The only thing is that outsiders are not allowed to see the Cortex because one time some outsiders tried to steal the Cortex and, the Cortex is our way home. So, it's forbidden. And you ask her about these outsiders and she tells you they were executed and tortured and the only thing they would say was Dracogen. So you're like, Dracogen wants the Cortex. So if you talk to him, he'll give you a quest to steal the Cortex. Or he'll also tell you that, as well as the magmatic amulet, the other thing he wants is the Cortex. And actually you can give him the Cortex instead of the amulet, if you want it. Yeah. And to open the portal, use the scalpel, or you can feed it some other people. There's a quest line involving basically a space Nazi, and you can feed her to the moor instead, and then it also kind of makes her repent, which is a good thing, I suppose. So, anyway, blah, 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 Lost Anchorage. To finish up then, you wanted to talk about a few mechanical highlights.
Yes.
So, first one is, back in time, Mila Vest, the attack by the Sorrow. It goes, crisis started, and you have to escape from the Sorrow.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about that, seeing as you particularly called it out and you said you want to talk about it later?
Because up to now, all your crisis events, is that true, have been battles. But in this one, it's not the case. Or is it? Could you have fought them all?
You can fight them all. I mean, you will lose. Yeah, so there's sorrow fragments, and there's like sorrow fire everywhere, and it's all horrible. And you can reactivate the shield generators to try and purge some of the fire, and really you're trying to get out of Mila Vest. And yes, you can try and rescue other cast-offs. Well, there's a whole bunch of things you can do, but you've got limited time because it's in the form of a crisis. So you have your turn and then the enemy's turn, and then eventually the sorrow itself shows up, and the sorrow itself will just one-shot everything. So you have a very limited time to try and get out of Mila Vest.
So you learn very quickly, because if you try to fight the sorrow fragments, you'll die. You'll die. So I changed tacticals just to try to make my way to the exit. And I thought it was quite clever, because you have the music of the crisis, and you have the limit, but you're not rushing through to exit. You're actually having to methodically make conscious decisions as to what you want to do next with your four-man team.
And there's things there you can miss as well. There's a Mir caster, for example, on one of the dead cast-offs, and you can clear some rubble and go in that direction and fetch it. There are other cast-offs you can rescue, for example, like Melmoth has given up and is going to like just let himself die, and you can like convince him, no, you need to still live, and he will then try and make his way to the exit. Yeah, there are various cast-offs who are just going to like die unless you tell them to run.
And they'll back you up as well. If you engage with them, you can tell they'll
help fight the sorrow fragments.
Exactly. So I thought it was very clever. And for me, I felt it managed to maintain the tension up to the last minute where I hit the exit.
The other one that I wanted to call out is the bit where you have to try and get to the Cortex, which is pretty much the same thing. It's a crisis, but it's not a combat crisis.
But it's slightly different because it's a heist. For me, it was a heist.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's like a heist. It's really cool. To me, this was the turning point where I was like, you know what? This game is good. This game actually is pretty good. Like, it felt so much like, oh, if only more of the game was like this. I thought it was really clever. So you arrive at the Lost Anchorage, and the music is all like Mass Effect, and it's kind of sci-fi, and it's like, oh, this is actually quite cool. Like this contrast of the weird organic thing of the Bloom and like the super high technology Lost Anchorage. And then you find out about the Cortex, blah, blah, blah. And there's also a guy there who says, oh, I'm willing to give you a tour. But he says, oh, I'm too busy. But later on, once you either have the quest from Dracogen to steal the Cortex, or you have the helmet, which needs to be cross-checked with the Cortex, then he will give you the tour. And when he does the tour, it actually starts a crisis. And it says, get to the Cortex and steal it or use the helmet on it. And I'm like, oh, it's so cool. And yeah, so while he's distracted, I mean, the way it plays out, he's giving you a tour of the anchorage. So he's going around the anchorage and explaining various bits of it to you. And you can distract him for longer by having a party member talk to him and ask him questions. Meanwhile, you can force open or hack the door to the Cortex chamber and then interact with the Cortex itself. And even if you're trying to just cross-check the information on the helmet with the Cortex actually says, oh, you actually need to open the Cortex chamber so I can deep scan the helmet, which means you have to enact level 3 of the Cortex removal process. It's like, you basically have to remove the Cortex anyway. So whether you're trying to steal the Cortex or scan the helmet, you still have to basically remove the Cortex. And it's really cool because the Cortex itself is a sequence of complicated stack checks, either intellect tests, because you're having to like do complicated tasks, and then also a quick fingers check at the main control pit to verify that you've performed the step correctly. Or instead of doing intellect checks on the Cortex, you can actually just smash the Cortex. It would be like, do this complicated task to unlock this lever and then pull the lever. You can just pull the lever with like great strength instead, or smash open this like, box to press this button. So you can do it either by might or by intellect. And then you can also have to use quick fingers. You basically have to exercise all your stat pools one way or the other. It was really cool. I really liked the kind of heist feel to it. It would be, I don't know, it showed so much promise. It made me think, wow, actually, if only there was more of this in the game.
And there was another case where I couldn't just go with 80%. There's too much at risk, too much at stake. So I went with 100% at some points.
Yeah, I mean, it turned out I actually had quite a good party for it. So, in my case, I had the last cast off, who had, in my case, had very high intellect and high intellect edge, and Eritis, who had high might and high might edge, in the Cortex room. And then Makina, who had high speed and speed edge, in the control pit. And then my last character was Tibia, because I pulled him back in after Rin had left. So he was just distracting the guy giving the tour.
I didn't pull anyone back in. So I only had 3 people doing this. I had Eritis at the Cortex, Calistige with the commander, and myself with my slow fingers.
So you actually managed to steal the Cortex?
I did. I couldn't leave in time. Well, how does yours conclude?
So with mine, I basically complete the Cortex removal procedure and then get it to scan the helmet. And the Cortex tells you that the Laskar's homeworld is called Ishkinu. And then once it scans the helmet, by looking at the star patterns it has in its memory for Ishkinu and the star patterns that the helmet recorded from, being outside the bloom, it realizes that the 9th world is Ishkinu. And so you can then go and talk to the commander of the station and tell her, hey, you're waiting for a ship to bring you home. This portal actually leads to your homeworld.
Is this still in the crisis?
In the crisis.
So you're rushing to tell her before the commander gets back to the Cortex room?
Yes. And then she'll run off to the Cortex room to confer with the Cortex. The Cortex will verify it to her. And then she'll be like, wow, thanks. We don't need this anymore. Here's the Cortex. And then they evacuate the station.
Okay. Seeing the Cortex is slightly different. So we all rush to the exit, which is on the other side of the Cortex room. And obviously, whoever's with the commander and whoever's at the terminal make it to the door. Beritis doesn't. So he starts getting shot at in, maybe 10 steps away from the main exit. I think at some point he gets mobilized, but I hid him. I was able to hide him still. And then the other 2 just eat attacks until Eritis is no longer immobilized. And when he leaves, the other 2 are so close to the door, we all get to escape.
Lucky. You made it out.
I made it out. I thought I could go to Dracogen and complete the quest, but then the quest says, report back to Dracogen in shame. I think the game thought I'd failed the mission because I was detected. Or caught.
But you still got the Cortex.
I still have the Cortex, yeah.
And you still traded it to him for the Memocaster.
Yes.
Okay. And in my case, I actually did this before I got the amulet. So I traded the Cortex to him for the meeting with the Memovira instead, and I kept the amulet for myself. And then after the next section, I then gave him the amulet once I finished using it to get the Memocaster. Optimization. Woo! I just realized we haven't really talked all the way up to the Memovira because we haven't talked about the Ascension. But never mind, let's do that next time because we've already been talking way too long.
What I'm impressed with is that it didn't just auto-fail me when I got detected. Most games, lesser games would have said, you haven't escaped the level, we've detected you, game out, please restart or reload. It let me fight to the bitter end, even though I wanted to give up as well.
Yeah, you've been quite good about not reloading when it goes sideways. I just reload when it goes sideways.
Oh, it sounded like you let things go sideways.
I let things go sideways a bit, but if they go really sideways, I was just like, reload. Yeah, I'm terrible.
But that's what this game teaches you very quickly as well. Should you die, you don't really die. You just go on. And, more interesting things happen. The very first encounter I don't remember where it was now, when you take on Koros, is that right?
Koro, Reef of Fallen Worlds.
Yes. And you surrender, he knocks you out and you appear somewhere else. So it does do this quite well.
Yeah, true. Oh man, there's so much we didn't talk about.
Knew that would happen.
Jeez. Okay. Well, anyway, for next time then, we'll talk about the remainder of the Bloom and then all the way up to the end of the game.
Okay.
Because it turns out there was a lot to talk about with this game. So we are extending this one more set of episodes. So yeah, even though we have actually mechanically finished the game, there's so much to talk about. So for next time, we'll talk about the game till the end of the game.
We were Lost Levels Club.
We still are Lost Levels Club.
Please rate and subscribe to us on iTunes.
Please, please, please.
Please find us on Twitter.
At Lost Levels Club.
You can also find us on Reddit.
/r/Lost Levels Club.
On email.
mike.and.ting@lostlevels.club.
On YouTube.
And Twitch as Lost Levels Club.
I think that's it.
I think that's it too.
What are you grateful for, Sir Michael?
I'm grateful to be home. It's the opposite of I'm grateful to be going on holiday. I'm grateful to be home after being away for so many weeks. I guess.
Sir Michael says bye.
Bye-bye.